Imani's hands trembled as she stared at her phone screen. The unknown number had seemed harmless enough, but the voice on the other end was about to detonate her entire world. In that moment, everything Imani thought she knew crumbled into dust. Have you ever been so broken by betrayal that you made a decision completely out of character? So desperate to escape pain that you threw caution to the wind and did something absolutely reckless? Imani Hayes had married a complete stranger after knowing him for exactly 2 weeks. Not for love, at least not the kind born from years of courtship and careful consideration. She married Declan because she was running from the soul-crushing moment she'd walked into her apartment to find her boyfriend of 5 years tangled up with her former best friend. Running from humiliation, running from the voice in her head that whispered she was worthless. When Declan proposed marriage after just 8 days of coffee dates and late-night conversations, Imani said yes. It was impulsive, insane, completely unlike the careful, sensible woman she'd always been. But for 6 beautiful weeks, it felt like the best mistake she'd ever made. They were broke but blissful. They laughed over cheap takeout meals. They stayed up until dawn talking about dreams and fears. They built something that felt startlingly real in that cramped apartment, until the phone call. Now Imani had to face a devastating question. What would you do if you discovered the man sleeping beside you every night was hiding a billion-dollar empire? What if your entire marriage was built on secrets you never saw coming? Welcome to Mr. Roman's Story Vault. Whether you're joining us for the first time, or you've been riding with us through every twist and turn, you're about to witness a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about trust, second chances, and the courage it takes to rebuild when everything falls apart. Before we go deeper into Imani's story, hit that subscribe button right now. And here's why. The stories shared on this channel aren't just entertainment. They're mirrors reflecting real human struggles, real redemption, real growth. They carry lessons that could shift your perspective on relationships, forgiveness, and finding yourself when you've lost everything. Smash that like button, turn on your notifications, and drop a comment telling us, have you ever made a reckless decision that changed your life? This is the story of a woman who lost everything, gambled on a stranger, and discovered that sometimes destruction is just preparation for something stronger. Let's go back to the beginning, to the moment that shattered Imani's world and set everything in motion. 3 months before Imani would marry a stranger, she was a completely different woman. Imani Hayes, 28 years old, had always been the type of person who planned everything. She color-coded her calendar, kept a detailed 5-year plan tucked in her desk drawer, and believed wholeheartedly that loyalty and consistency would eventually be rewarded. Her mother had raised her that way, with a firm belief that if you gave your best to people, they'd give their best back. She'd grown up in a tight-knit family in North Carolina, the youngest of 2 daughters. Her sister Nia had always been the bold one, the risk-taker who backpacked through Europe on a whim and changed careers like other people changed hairstyles. Imani was different. She was steady, reliable, the daughter who called home every Sunday, who saved 20% of every paycheck, who read relationship books and believed in doing things the right way. After graduating with a master's degree in marketing from Spelman College, Imani landed a solid position at a mid-sized consulting firm in Atlanta. She was good at her job. Exceptional, actually. Her supervisor frequently praised her innovative campaigns, and within 2 years, she'd become one of the youngest senior consultants in the company. That's when the offers started rolling in. New York firms wanting her expertise, a Los Angeles company offering nearly double her salary, opportunities that could have launched her career into the stratosphere. But Imani turned them all down because of Marcus Wellington. She'd met Marcus during her final year of graduate school at a networking mixer. He was charming, ambitious, working toward his MBA, and he pursued her with the kind of focused intensity that made her feel chosen, special. Within 6 months, they were inseparable. Within a year, they'd moved into a modest apartment together in Atlanta's West End neighborhood. Marcus talked a beautiful game about their future. Marriage by 30. Kids shortly after. Building wealth together. Growing old on a porch somewhere, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. He painted such vivid pictures of their life together that Imani could practically taste it. So when the job offer came from New York, a position that would have placed her among the top marketers in the country, Marcus sat her down with concern creasing his forehead. "Baby, I'm still building my career here," he'd said, taking her hands in his. "If you leave, we're looking at long distance for at least 2 years, maybe more. You know what that does to relationships." Imani had felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. Her dreams pulling her in one direction, her heart pulling her in another. She chose Marcus. Then the Los Angeles opportunity came. Then Chicago. Then Boston. Each time, Marcus had a reason why the timing wasn't right, why they needed to stay in Atlanta just a little longer. And each time, Imani said no to her ambitions because she believed she was investing in something bigger, a partnership, a future, a love that would be worth the sacrifice. 5 years she gave to Marcus Wellington, 5 years of being the perfect girlfriend. She learned to cook his favorite meals. She attended every one of his company events, smiling and networking on his behalf. She picked up his dry cleaning, remembered his mother's birthday, and supported him through 2 job changes and 1 minor career crisis. When her firm offered her a promotion that required occasional travel, Marcus sulked for a week. "I just need you here, Imani," he'd said. "Present. I can't build a life with someone who's always on a plane." So, she negotiated the promotion down to a role with less travel and less pay. Looking back, Imani couldn't pinpoint exactly when she'd started shrinking herself, when she'd stopped mentioning her own dreams because Marcus's always seemed to take priority, when she'd begun apologizing for her success because it made him uncomfortable. She just knew that by year 5, she'd become a smaller version of herself, still successful by outside standards, but hollow in places she didn't like to examine too closely. Her best friend Zara had noticed. During their monthly brunches, Zara would study Imani with concerned eyes and ask careful questions. "Are you happy, Manny?" Of course, Imani would respond automatically. "Marcus and I are solid." "That's not what I asked." But Imani would change the subject, because admitting doubt felt like admitting failure. She'd invested 5 years. You didn't just walk away from that kind of investment. Then came that Tuesday in late September. Imani had woken up feeling slightly off, a headache blooming behind her eyes, a vague nausea churning in her stomach. By 2 in the afternoon, her supervisor noticed her wincing at her computer screen and sent her home early. "Get some rest," he'd insisted. "Whatever it is can wait until tomorrow." Imani had texted Marcus to let him know she was heading home, but he didn't respond. That wasn't unusual. He often got caught up in meetings and didn't check his phone for hours. The September heat hit her like a wall when she stepped outside. Atlanta was experiencing an unusually humid spell, the kind of weather that made your clothes stick to your skin and your patience wear thin. She cranked the air conditioning in her Honda Civic and drove home, already planning to take some medicine and sleep off whatever bug was trying to take hold. Their apartment building was quiet at that time of day. Most of their neighbors worked 9 to 5 jobs, so the hallways were empty as Imani climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. She fumbled with her keys, her head pounding harder now, desperate to get inside and lie down. The first thing she heard when she opened the door was laughter. Marcus's laugh, deep and unguarded in a way he rarely was with her anymore. And a woman's voice. Light, familiar, responding to something he'd said. Imani's first thought, strangely, was confusion rather than alarm. Marcus was allowed to have friends over. Maybe it was a colleague. Maybe it was someone from his networking group. But something about the quality of that laughter made her stomach clench. She moved through their small entryway, past the kitchen where she'd made breakfast. That morning, toward the living room where the voices were coming from. What she saw in those next seconds would replay in her mind for months afterward. Marcus was on their couch. Their couch, the one she'd saved up for, the one they'd spent an entire Saturday assembling together, laughing over the confusing instructions. He wasn't alone. Shanice Porter, Imani's former college roommate from freshman year. The woman Imani had reconnected with 8 months ago at an alumni event. The woman she'd invited to their apartment for game nights and dinners. The woman she'd confided in about her worries, her dreams, her relationship struggles. They were tangled together in a way that left absolutely no room for innocent explanation. Time seemed to fracture. Imani saw every detail with horrible clarity. Shanice's hand on Marcus's chest, his arm around her waist, their clothes. Disheveled, the wine glasses on the coffee table, the way they jerked apart when they noticed her standing there. Imani. Marcus started, his face draining of color, but Imani couldn't hear whatever excuse was about to come out of his mouth. A rushing sound filled her ears, like she was underwater, drowning in her own living room. Shanice grabbed her shirt, her eyes wide. "Oh God, Imani, I'm so sorry, we didn't—" "Get out." Imani's voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. "Get out of my house. Baby, wait, let me explain." Marcus stood, reaching for her. Something broke loose inside Imani's chest. 5 years of making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient, came roaring to the surface. "Don't touch me." The scream tore from her throat, raw and jagged. "Get away from me." Shanice scrambled for her shoes, mumbling apologies that meant absolutely nothing. She rushed past Imani, refusing to make eye contact, and fled out the door. Marcus stood there in their living room, half-dressed, looking more annoyed than remorseful. "If you would just calm down and let me talk." "How long?" Imani's hands were shaking so violently she had to clasp them together. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus ran his hand over his face. "Imani, it's not what you think." "How long?" 3 months, he finally admitted. "But it's not serious. It's just—" Imani didn't wait to hear the rest. She turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving her keys on the entry table, leaving 5 years of her life scattered across that living room floor. She made it to her car before the tears came, great gasping sobs that shook her entire body. She gripped the steering wheel, unable to see through the blur of tears, unable to breathe past the crushing weight on her chest. 5 years. She'd given up New York for him. Los Angeles, Chicago, Boston. She'd shrunk her dreams, dimmed her light, made herself convenient and accommodating and perfect. And he'd repaid her by sleeping with her friend, in their home, on their couch. Somehow, Imani managed to drive to Zara's house across town. She didn't remember the drive, didn't remember parking, didn't remember walking up to the door. Zara took one look at her face and pulled her inside. What happened? The story came out in broken fragments. Marcus, Shanice, the couch, 3 months. Everything. Zara held her while she cried, not offering empty platitudes, just solid presence while Imani's world fell apart. "I'm so stupid," Imani choked out sometime after midnight. They were sitting on Zara's porch, wrapped in blankets, Imani's tears finally spent. "I gave him everything. How did I not see this?" "Don't you dare blame yourself," Zara said fiercely. "This is on him. On both of them. You loved honestly. They betrayed dishonestly. That's not your fault." But it felt like her fault. It felt like she'd missed some crucial sign, some red flag she should have caught. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Marcus calling, texting, leaving voicemails she couldn't bring herself to listen to. Her mother called the next morning, somehow having heard the news through Nia. "Baby girl, come home," her mother urged. "Come back to North Carolina for a while. Get away from all this." "I can't, Mama. I have work. I have a life here." "What you have is a broken heart that needs time to heal. Don't make any big decisions right now. Just breathe. Just take it one day at a time." But her mother's advice felt impossible to follow. How was she supposed to just breathe when breathing hurt? How was she supposed to take time when every second felt like drowning? Imani had always been the good girl, the one who did everything right, the one who believed that goodness and loyalty were rewarded. But where had that gotten her? Betrayed, humiliated, alone. Something dark and reckless was taking root in her chest. A voice that whispered, "What's the point of being careful? What's the point of playing it safe?" Being careful had cost her 5 years, and every opportunity she'd sacrificed at the altar of a man who couldn't even be faithful. As Imani lay in Zara's guest room that night, staring at the ceiling, she made a decision. She was done being careful. She was done playing it safe. She was done waiting for good things to come to good people. If the universe wanted reckless, she'd give it reckless. She had no idea just how reckless she was about to become. 3 weeks passed in a haze of mechanical motions and hollow routines. Imani moved out of the apartment she'd shared with Marcus, unable to spend another night surrounded by memories that now felt contaminated. She found a tiny studio in East Atlanta, barely 500 square feet, with a window that overlooked a parking lot and walls so thin she could hear her neighbor's television through the drywall. It was depressing and cramped, and nothing like the future she'd envisioned. It was perfect. She wanted nothing that reminded her of the life she'd been building with Marcus. No shared furniture, no carefully chosen decorations, no traces of the woman who'd been foolish enough to believe in forever. Zara helped her move the few belongings she'd taken from the old place, mostly clothes and personal items. Everything else she'd left behind. Let Marcus deal with it. Let him explain to their landlord why the lease was breaking early. Let him sit on that couch alone and think about what he'd destroyed. Work became her refuge. Imani stayed late every evening, volunteering for projects no one else wanted, burying herself in campaigns and strategy sessions until her mind was too exhausted to replay that terrible scene on the couch. Her colleagues noticed but didn't pry. Office gossip traveled fast, and somehow word had gotten around that Imani was going through a breakup. They gave her sympathetic looks in the break room and didn't ask her to join happy hours anymore. Her phone rang constantly. Her mother called every other day from North Carolina, her voice tight with worry. "Imani, baby, talk to me. Tell me what you're feeling." "I'm fine, Mama." "You're not fine. No one's fine after something like this. I'm handling it. Handling it isn't the same as healing from it." But Imani didn't want to heal. Healing required feeling, and feeling hurt too much. Numbness was better. Autopilot was safer. Her sister Nia called from Chicago, offering to fly down for the weekend. "Just say the word, and I'm there. We can trash, talk Marcus, eat our weight in ice cream, slash his tires, whatever you need." Imani had almost smiled at that. "I don't need you to fly down here. I'm okay. You're always okay, Manny. That's your problem. You never let yourself fall apart." But Imani had fallen apart. She'd just done it quietly, privately, in a studio apartment where no one could see. Marcus tried reaching out for the first week. Calls, texts, even showing up at her office once, forcing security to escort him out when she refused to come downstairs. His messages started apologetic and gradually shifted to defensive. "You're being dramatic. We can work through this. I made a mistake, but you're acting like I committed a crime. You were always so focused on work anyway. What was I supposed to do?" That last message had made something cold and hard settle in Imani's chest. He was actually trying to make this her fault, as if her dedication to the career she'd already compromised for him justified his infidelity. She blocked his number after that. Shanice tried reaching out too. Long, rambling emails full of excuses and justifications. Imani deleted them without reading past the first few lines. There was nothing Shanice could say that would matter. Some betrayals didn't deserve the courtesy of closure. By the third week, something shifted inside Imani. The numbness began cracking, and underneath it wasn't sadness anymore. It was anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but something colder, more dangerous. She was angry at Marcus for wasting 5 years of her life. Angry at Shanice for proving that trust was a liability. Angry at herself for being so stupidly, naively loyal. But more than that, she was angry at the version of herself who'd played by all the rules and ended up with nothing to show for it. What had being careful gotten her? What had being the good girl, the patient girlfriend, the woman who sacrificed and compromised, actually earned her? Heartbreak, humiliation, starting over at 20 to 8 in a studio apartment with thin walls. The realization crystallized one Friday afternoon at work. Imani was in the break room, mindlessly stirring sugar into coffee she didn't really want. when two of her colleagues walked in, deep in conversation. "I'm just saying, it's insane," Kelly from accounting was saying. "My cousin met this guy in Vegas, knew him for literally 6 days, and they got married, one of those chapel things." "That's crazy," her companion replied. "What happened? Did they get it annulled?" "That's the wild part. They're still together, 2 years later, and apparently they're disgustingly happy. She says it was the best impulsive decision she ever made." They grabbed their coffee and left, completely unaware of the seed they'd just planted. Imani stood there, stirring her coffee long after the sugar had dissolved, turning the story over in her mind. 6 days, a stranger, an impulsive decision, and happiness. That night, alone in her studio apartment, with nothing but the drone of her neighbor's television for company, Imani opened her laptop. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, "Don't make any big decisions right now." But why not? Her big, careful decision to stay with Marcus had blown up in her face. Maybe it was time to stop being careful. She downloaded a dating app, one she'd never used before, one that felt far removed from her normal, sensible life. Creating the profile felt like an act of rebellion. She chose a photo Zara had taken of her last month, before everything fell apart. In it, she was laughing, genuinely happy, unaware of what was coming. For her bio, she bypassed all the usual cheerful descriptions and wrote the truth: recently single. Not looking for forever, just looking for now. No games, no expectations, just honesty. She hit publish before she could second guess herself. The response was immediate. Within an hour, her inbox was flooded with messages. Most of them were exactly what she expected: crude, shallow, transparently dishonest. Men who clearly hadn't read her profile or didn't care what it said. Messages that ranged from boring to offensive, making her question what she'd expected from this experiment. She was about to delete the entire app when a new message came through. The profile name was simple: Declanf. Just one photo: a man at a coffee shop, face partially hidden by a baseball cap, laugh at something off, camera. The quality was grainy, clearly not a professional shot. His bio was refreshingly brief, and trying to figure out what comes next. Coffee enthusiast, believes in honest conversations. His message was a single question: your profile says you're looking for now. What does now mean to you? Imani stared at the message. No pickup line, no comment about her appearance. Just a genuine question that suggested he'd actually read what she wrote. Something about the straightforwardness appealed to her. She typed back: now means not overthinking everything. Not planning 5 years ahead, only to watch those plans crumble. Not building something that requires constant sacrifice. Now means living in the present moment, whatever that looks like. She hit send before she could soften it, make it more palatable, more pleasant. His response came within minutes. That might be the most honest thing I've read all week. Coffee tomorrow. Imani hesitated, her finger hovering over the keyboard. This was crazy. She didn't meet random men from the internet. She didn't go on dates with strangers whose faces she could barely see in their profile photos. But wasn't that exactly the point? Doing something completely unlike herself? Tomorrow works, she typed. What time? They agreed on 2 in the afternoon at a coffee shop in Midtown. Public, casual, easy to leave if things went badly. Imani set her phone down and stared at the ceiling of her tiny studio. Her heart was racing, though whether from anxiety or something else, she couldn't tell. She'd just agreed to meet a complete stranger, a man she knew absolutely nothing about, except that he liked coffee and asked decent questions. Her mother would be horrified. Her sister would call her reckless. Even Zara would probably advise caution. But Imani was done with caution. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Imani changed her outfit 3 times, frustrated with herself for caring what some random stranger thought of her appearance. She finally settled on jeans and a simple green blouse, casual enough to seem effortless, nice enough to feel put together. She arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early, her stomach doing nervous flips. What was she doing? This was insane. She should leave right now, unmatch with this Declan person, delete the app, and go back to her sensible life. Except her sensible life had led her to a broken heart and a studio apartment with thin walls. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door opened and a man walked in, scanning the room. He was tall, over 6 feet, with warm brown eyes and an uncertain smile. He wore jeans and a simple grey Henley shirt, his dark hair slightly messy like he'd run his hands through it too many times. When his eyes landed on her, his face relaxed into genuine warmth. "Imani?" "Ooh." She stood, her nervousness somehow easing at the sound of his voice. "Declan, thanks for meeting me," he said, gesturing to the counter. "Can I get you something?" They ordered coffee. She got a caramel latte, he got black coffee with a shot of espresso, and found a small table by the window. For the first time in 3 weeks, Imani felt something other than anger or numbness. She felt curious, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The first thing Imani noticed about Declan Frost was his hands. They were strong but careful as he wrapped them around his coffee cup, and when he spoke, he used them to emphasize points, to shape ideas in the air between them. There was something genuine in the way he moved, no practiced smoothness, no rehearsed charm. Just a man who seemed comfortable in his own skin, in a way that felt increasingly rare. "So," he said, settling into his chair across from her, "you want honesty. I can do honesty. Can you?" Imani challenged, her guard still firmly in place. "Let's find out." He took a sip of his coffee, considering his words. "I'm not on this app looking for a relationship. At least, I don't think I am. I'm in this weird space where I'm trying to figure out who I am when no one's watching, when no one has expectations." "That's cryptic," Imani said. Declan smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that made him look younger. "Fair. Okay, here's the uncensored version. I spent the last decade doing what everyone expected of me, working in my family's business, playing a role I never auditioned for, becoming someone I didn't recognize in the mirror. 3 months ago, I walked away from all of it. Just walked away, he confirmed. Told my family I needed time to figure out what I actually want, instead of what they want for me. So now I'm here, drinking overpriced coffee with a beautiful stranger who's also looking for something different." The compliment caught Imani off guard, but it didn't feel like a line. It felt observational, casual. "Your turn," Declan said. "What's your story?" Imani hadn't planned to tell him, hadn't planned to unload her baggage on a first meeting with someone she might never see again. But something about the way he listened, fully present, not waiting for his turn to talk, loosened the words from her throat. "I wasted 5 years on someone who didn't deserve 5 minutes, she said. "I gave up career opportunities, shrunk my dreams, made myself smaller because I thought that's what love required. 3 weeks ago, I came home early and found him with my former friend." Declan winced. "That's brutal. Double betrayal," Imani continued, surprised by how steady her voice remained. "The man I loved and the woman I trusted. So here I am, starting over in a studio apartment, questioning every decision I've ever made. Hence the dating app," Declan said. "Hence the dating app," Imani agreed. "I'm tired of being sensible. Being sensible got me a broken heart and a lot of regret." Declan was quiet for a moment, studying her with those warm brown eyes. "Can I tell you something?" "Go ahead." "You weren't being perfect for nothing," he said carefully. "You were being authentic. You were loving the way you know how to love, fully, generously. The tragedy isn't that you gave everything. The tragedy is that he wasn't capable of receiving it the way it deserved to be received." The words hit Imani square in the chest. She'd been carrying so much self-blame, so much shame about not being enough, not seeing the signs, not being smarter. But Declan had just reframed the entire narrative in a single sentence. "That's..." She started, then stopped, her throat tight. "Thank you. Just the truth," Declan said softly. They talked for 4 hours. The coffee shop began filling with the late afternoon crowd, then emptied again as evening approached. They ordered more coffee, then switched to tea. The barista started wiping down tables around them, but neither Imani nor Declan seemed ready to leave. They talked about childhood dreams. Imani had wanted to be a writer before practical concerns steered her. Toward marketing, Declan had wanted to be an architect before family obligation redirected his path. They talked about favorite books, worst travel experiences, the strange, comfort of thunderstorms, and the specific loneliness of crowded rooms. "What scares you most?" Declan asked as the sun began setting outside the window. "Wasting more time," Imani answered without hesitation. "Waking up at 40 and realizing I spent my whole life playing it safe and have nothing to show for it except regrets. What would not playing it safe look like?" Imani considered the question. "I don't know yet, but I'm trying to find out." When they finally left the coffee shop, the streetlights were flickering on across Midtown. They stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "Can I see you again?" Declan asked. "Tomorrow, maybe." "Tomorrow works," Imani said, and realized she was smiling. They met the next day for lunch, and the day after that for an evening walk through Piedmont Park. The park was alive with early autumn, leaves just beginning to turn golden at the edges. A slight coolness to the air that made summer's humidity feel like a distant memory. They walked for hours, conversation flowing as easily as it had in the coffee shop. Declan told her about the suffocating pressure of family expectations, how he'd spent years in boardrooms making decisions that made everyone else happy while hollowing him out inside. "My father built this empire from nothing," Declan explained as they walked past the lake. "He's brilliant, driven, and absolutely certain that his way is the only way. For years, I tried to be the son he wanted, but I was dying inside." "What made you finally leave?" Imani asked. "I looked in the mirror one morning and didn't recognize the person staring back. That was terrifying enough to make me brave." Imani understood that completely. They met again on day 4 at a 24-hour diner at midnight. Imani had texted him after a particularly brutal day at work, half joking that she needed pancakes and commiseration. Declan showed up in sweatpants and a hoodie, looking comfortable and real. Over plates of French toast and scrambled eggs, Imani found herself laughing for the first time in weeks. Really laughing, the kind that made her stomach hurt and her eyes water. Declan had a way of finding humor in small absurdities, the existential crisis of choosing between syrup flavors, the specific, tragedy of soggy hash browns, the conspiracy theory that all-night diners existed in a pocket dimension outside normal time. "You're ridiculous," Imani said, wiping tears from her eyes. "I'm excellent," Declan corrected with mock seriousness. "There's a difference." Day 5, they met at the fountain downtown, sitting on the edge while street performers entertained the Friday night crowd. A violinist played something haunting and beautiful, and Declan pulled out his wallet to drop a 20 in her case. "That's generous," Imani observed. "She's following her dream instead of playing it safe," Declan said. "That deserves support." They sat there as the city moved around them, talking about everything and nothing. Imani noticed how Declan listened, not just waited for his turn to speak, but genuinely absorbed what she said, asked follow-up questions, remembered details from previous conversations. It was intoxicating to be heard like that. By day 6, Imani realized something unsettling. She felt more seen by this near stranger than she'd felt in 5 years with Marcus. With Marcus, she'd learned to edit herself, to present only the parts he found acceptable. But with Declan, she could be sharp-edged and soft-hearted, ambitious and uncertain, angry and hopeful all at once. "This is weird, right?" she asked him on day 7 as they shared a bench in a small neighborhood park. "I've known you less than a week." "It's definitely weird," Declan agreed. "But is it bad weird or good weird?" "I don't know yet," Imani admitted. "Maybe both." Day 8, Declan invited her to his apartment. "Just to talk," he clarified quickly. "No pressure. I feel like we're always in public spaces. Thought it might be nice to have a real conversation without background noise." Imani agreed, though her heart raced as she drove to the address he'd sent. His apartment was modest, a one-bedroom in a quiet complex, furnished simply with a worn leather couch, a small bookshelf crammed with novels, and a kitchen table that looked second-hand. It was clean but humble, the home of someone living carefully within their means. Imani felt herself relax. This matched the man she'd gotten to know. Genuine, unpretentious, focused on substance over appearance. They ordered Chinese takeout and ate sitting on his living room floor, containers spread between them like a feast. "Can I ask you something?" Declan said, setting down his chopsticks. "Go ahead. What are you looking for?" "Really?" Imani thought about it, chewing slowly on lo mein. "I think I'm looking for proof that taking risks can lead somewhere good, that not planning everything doesn't automatically mean disaster." "And?" Declan prompted. "Are you finding that proof?" "Maybe," Imani said. "These past 8 days have felt more real than the past 5 years." "I know what you mean," Declan said quietly. "I feel like myself around you. Not the version of me that everyone expects, just me." They were sitting close now, close enough that Imani could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "This is crazy," she whispered. "What if we just did it?" Declan asked suddenly. Imani blinked. "Did what?" "Got married." For a moment, she thought she'd misheard him. Then she laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. "You're joking." But his expression remained serious, open, vulnerable. "I'm not saying I have all the answers, and I'm not saying this is how people are supposed to do things, but Imani, in these 8 days, I've felt more alive than I have in years. You make me want to be brave. You make me want to take the kind of risks we keep talking about." "Declan, that's insane," Imani said, but her heart was pounding. "Is it?" he challenged. "Or is insane doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results? You played it safe for 5 years. I played it safe for a decade. Where did that get us? Maybe taking a leap of faith is exactly what we both need." Imani's mind raced. Every rational thought screamed that this was reckless, foolish, the kind of decision you make in movies but never in real life. But when had being rational protected her heart? When had being sensible led her anywhere except to disappointment? "We barely know each other," she said weakly. "We know the important things," Declan countered. "We know what we're running from. We know what we're trying to find. We know that this, whatever this is between us, feels different, feels right." Imani looked at this man she'd known for just over a week. A man who listened without judgment, who encouraged her dreams, who made her laugh at midnight diners and feel seen in crowded parks. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "Don't make any big decisions right now." But her mother had never had her heart shattered by someone she'd given everything to. Her mother had never felt the soul-crushing weight of playing by all the rules and losing anyway. "Okay," Imani heard herself say. "Let's do it." Declan's eyes widened. "Seriously?" "Seriously," Imani confirmed, and suddenly she was laughing, giddy with the recklessness of it. "Let's get married. Let's do something completely insane and see where it leads." Declan pulled her into a kiss, their first, and it tasted like possibility and fear, and the kind of hope that only comes from leaping without looking. They were really doing this. 2 broken people, 8 days of knowing each other, about to make the biggest gamble of their lives. They chose Savannah because it felt far enough from Atlanta to be an adventure, but close enough to reach in a single day's drive. The city had a romantic quality, historic squares draped in Spanish moss, cobblestone streets that seemed lifted from another century, and a courthouse that processed marriages with efficient southern charm. Imani called Zara the morning after Declan's proposal, her hands still shaking with the magnitude of what she'd agreed to. "You're doing what?" Zara's voice climbed 3 octaves. "Getting married. This weekend. In Savannah." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Imani checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Zara, I'm here. I'm just..." "Mani, are you serious right now? You've known this man for 8 days. 9, technically," Imani corrected, then realized that didn't help her case. "This is insane. This is the definition of insane." "I know," Imani said quietly, "but I need you there anyway. Will you come?" Another pause. Then Zara sighed, long and heavy. "Of course I'll come. Someone needs to be there to either celebrate this miracle or help you escape, if he turns out to be a serial killer." He's not a serial killer. That's what they all say before they end up on a true crime podcast. Despite the absurdity of the situation, Imani smiled. So, you'll be my witness? I'll be your witness. But Imani, I really hope you know what you're doing. I don't, Imani admitted. But for the first time in weeks, I feel like I'm doing something instead of just surviving. That has to count for something. The drive to Savannah took 4 hours. Declan picked Imani up early Saturday morning, and they rode with the windows down, letting the autumn air whip through the car. They didn't talk much during the drive, not from awkwardness, but from the weight of what they were about to do settling over them both. Zara had driven separately, texting Imani updates peppered with concern and dark humor, and just crossed the state line, still time to back out. And Savannah city limits, last chance for sanity. At the hotel. Okay, the city is gorgeous. Still think you're crazy. Imani had found a dress the day before at a small boutique in Little 5 Points. It was simple white lace with a fitted bodice and a skirt that fell just below her knees. Nothing elaborate, nothing that screamed traditional wedding, but when she'd tried it on, the shop owner had gotten tears in her eyes. "You look absolutely radiant, honey," the woman had said. Radiant felt like an overstatement, but Imani had to admit she looked happy. Terrified, but happy. Declan wore a navy suit that made his brown eyes look even warmer. When Imani met him in the hotel lobby that afternoon, he stopped mid-step, just staring at her. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Imani replied, smoothing down her dress nervously. Zara emerged from the elevator, wearing a burgundy dress and an expression caught between support and skepticism. She hugged Imani tightly. "Last chance to run," she whispered in Imani's ear. "I'm not running," Imani whispered back. "Then I'm with you all the way." The courthouse was a stately building with white columns and manicured gardens. Inside, the halls echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. They checked in at the clerk's office, filled out paperwork that felt simultaneously momentous and mundane, and waited for their turn before the judge. Sitting on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, Zara took Imani's hand. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" she asked quietly, making sure Declan couldn't hear from where he stood talking to the clerk. "No," Imani admitted. "But I wasn't sure about Marcus either, and I gave him 5 years. Maybe uncertainty isn't a good enough reason not to do something. Maybe it's just part of being alive." That's surprisingly philosophical for someone about to marry a stranger. "He's not a stranger anymore," Imani said, watching Declan across the hall. "Not really. You know what I mean." "I do, and you're right to be concerned. But Zara, these past 9 days, I've felt more like myself than I have in years. If this crashes and burns, at least I'll know I was brave enough to try something different." Zara squeezed her hand. "Then let's get you married." They were called into the courtroom at 3:15. The judge was a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and reading glasses perched on her nose. She'd clearly performed this ceremony hundreds of times, but she treated each moment with gentle reverence. "Marriage is a serious commitment," she began, looking between Imani and Declan. "It's a promise to show up for each other, especially when things get difficult. Do you both understand that?" "Yes, Your Honor," they said in unison. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes to pledge forever to someone she'd known for just over a week. When it came time for vows, Declan took both of Imani's hands in his. "I promise to be honest with you," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I promise to support your dreams. I promise to see you, really see you, every single day." Imani's throat tightened. "I promise to be brave with you. I promise to build something real, even when it's hard. I promise to choose you, starting right now." The judge smiled. "By the power vested in me by the state of Georgia, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Declan cupped Imani's face gently and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Imani saw tears on Zara's cheeks despite her friend's skepticism. "Ladies and gentlemen," the judge announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Frost. Mrs. Frost, Imani Frost." The name felt foreign and thrilling all at once. They signed the marriage certificate, Imani's hand shaking slightly as she wrote her new name for the first time. Zara signed as their witness, then pulled them both into a fierce hug. "I really hope this works out," she whispered. "Because if it does, it's going to be the most beautiful, crazy story ever." They spent their wedding night at a bed and breakfast near Forsyth Park, in a room with tall windows and antique furniture that creaked with history. Zara had hugged them both goodbye, making Imani promise to call her in a few days then. Driven back to Atlanta with a mixture of hope and worry written across her face. Alone in their room, the reality of what they'd done settled over them. "We just got married," Imani said, sitting on the edge of the four-poster bed. "We did," Declan confirmed, loosening his tie. "To each other. That's generally how it works." Imani laughed, slightly hysterical. "Is insane." "Completely," Declan agreed, sitting beside her. "Want to talk about it?" So they talked, not about the ceremony or the legality of what they'd just done, but about what came next. They talked about expectations and boundaries, about what kind of marriage they wanted to build from this unconventional beginning. "I need honesty," Imani said, as midnight approached. "Complete honesty. I can handle a lot, but I can't handle being lied to again." "You have my word," Declan promised. "Honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." They talked about small things too, how Declan was a morning person while Imani needed coffee before she could form coherent sentences, how she hated doing dishes but didn't mind laundry, how he could cook exactly 3 meals competently and everything else was a dangerous experiment. As dawn broke over Savannah, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they stood at the window together, watching the city wake up. "No regrets?" Declan asked softly. Imani leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Ask me again in a year." "Deal." They returned to Atlanta on Sunday evening and began the strange process of merging their lives. Declan moved into Imani's studio apartment, bringing surprisingly few belongings, some clothes. A laptop, a box of books, and a battered coffee maker he insisted made the perfect brew. "Is this everything?" Imani asked, looking at the small pile of possessions. "I'm a minimalist," Declan explained. "Or maybe I just never felt attached to things. Either way, this is it." The studio was cramped with 2 people, but they made it work. They established routines quickly, morning coffee together before Imani left for work, evening walks through the neighborhood to decompress, late-night conversations about everything from philosophy to celebrity gossip. Declan supported Imani's career in ways Marcus never had. When she mentioned a promotion opportunity that required presenting to senior leadership, Declan helped her practice her pitch, offering genuine feedback and enthusiastic encouragement. "You're going to crush this," he said after her 5th run-through. "You have to say that. You're my husband. I'm saying it because it's true. You're brilliant, Imani. They'd be fools not to promote you." Money was tight, but they managed. Declan picked up freelance consulting work, projects he could do remotely, hours he could set himself. He was vague about the specifics, mentioning clients and contracts but never going into detail. Imani didn't press. They split bills evenly, shopped sales, and found joy in cheap date nights and home-cooked meals. 6 weeks passed in a blur of simple happiness. Imani had never lived with anyone except Marcus, and she'd expected friction, adjustment periods, arguments about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. But with Declan, everything flowed easily. He cleaned without being asked, remembered her preferences, gave her space when she needed it, and companionship when she didn't want to be alone. "This feels too easy," she told Zara during a lunch catch-up in week 5. "Maybe that's what it's supposed to feel like when it's right," Zara suggested, though her skepticism had softened considerably. "He treats you well?" "He treats me amazingly. He's supportive and kind and actually listens when I talk." "Then enjoy it, Manny. You deserve something good." But in the back of Imani's mind, a small voice whispered warnings. Things that seemed too good to be true usually were. Perfect situations often hid imperfect secrets. She pushed the thoughts away, choosing to live in the happiness of the present moment. She had no idea that in just a few days, a single phone call would shatter every assumption she'd made about the man she'd married. The foundation they were building felt solid, but it was resting on ground that had never been as stable as it seemed. Tuesday started like any other day. Imani arrived at her office at 8:30, coffee in hand, mentally, preparing for a full day of client presentations and strategy meetings. She'd been working on a major campaign for a local restaurant chain, and today was the day she'd pitch her vision to their executive team. Declan had kissed her goodbye that morning, told her she'd be amazing, and reminded her to text him when the presentation was over. It was the kind of ordinary domestic moment that still filled her with quiet wonder, having someone genuinely invested in her success. The morning flew by in a blur of PowerPoint slides and talking points. Her presentation went better than expected. The clients loved her concept, approved the budget on the spot, and her supervisor pulled her aside afterward to mention that a senior marketing director position was opening up soon. "You should apply," he said. "You'd be perfect for it." Imani floated back to her desk, riding the high of professional validation. She texted Declan immediately, crushed it. They approved everything, might have a promotion opportunity coming. His response came within seconds. "Told you, you're unstoppable." "Celebrating tonight?" "Definitely. Your tum to pick dinner." "Deal. Proud of you." Those 3 words made her smile at her computer screen like a teenager. "Before we continue with what happens next, can I ask you something? If you're enjoying Imani's story, if you're feeling the emotions, the tension, the hope, hit that like button right now. And drop a comment telling me, what would you do in Imani's situation? Would you take the risk on a stranger, or would you play it safe? I want to hear from you, because your stories matter just as much as the ones we tell here. Now, let's get back to Imani's day, the day everything changed. She was responding to emails, still buzzing from her successful presentation, when her phone rang. Unknown number. Normally she'd let it go to voicemail, but she'd been expecting a potential client to call, so she answered. "This is Imani. Mrs. Frost?" A woman's voice, professional and polished, came through the line. "Yes?" Imani replied, still adjusting to her married name even after 6 weeks. "Mrs. Frost, this is Patricia Holbrook, your husband's executive assistant. Mr. Frost hasn't been answering his phone, and we have an urgent situation at headquarters that requires his immediate attention. The board is convening in 2 hours regarding the merger with TechWave Solutions, and we need his approval on—" "I'm sorry," Imani interrupted, her brain struggling to process what she was hearing. "I think you have the wrong number." A pause. "Is this not Mrs. Imani Frost?" "It is, but—" Imani's heart started beating faster. "My husband doesn't have an executive assistant." The silence that followed felt heavy, loaded with something Imani couldn't quite identify. "Mrs. Frost," the woman said carefully, "I've been Mr. Declan Frost's executive assistant for 7 years. I'm calling from Frost Industries headquarters regarding urgent matters that need his signature. Is he available?" Frost Industries, executive assistant, headquarters. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. Declan worked freelance consulting. He wore the same 3 shirts. They split their $40 grocery bills. He'd moved into her cramped studio apartment with a single box of belongings. "Mrs. Frost, are you still there?" "Yes," Imani managed, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. I'll have him call you back." She ended the call with shaking hands. For several long moments, she just sat there, staring at her computer screen without seeing it. There had to be an explanation, a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a case of mistaken identity, someone else with the same name. But the woman had said 7 years. She'd known Imani's name. She'd called her Mrs. Frost. With trembling fingers, Imani minimized her work documents and opened a search browser. She typed slowly, as if the act of typing made it more real. Declan Frost. She hit enter. The results loaded instantly, and Imani's world tilted sideways. Declan Frost, CEO of Frost Industries, steps back from daily operations. Article dated 3 months ago. Billionaire tech mogul takes sabbatical. What's next for Frost Industries? The Frost Empire. How one man built a multi-billion-dollar company before age 35. Sint. Her hand moved to her mouse, clicking on the first article. A photo loaded, professional, high quality, taken at some corporate event. It was Declan. Her Declan, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, standing in front of a massive glass building with Frost Industries emblazoned across the facade. He looked polished, powerful, every inch the billionaire CEO the headline claimed him to be. This had to be a mistake, some elaborate confusion, but she kept clicking. Article after article, photo after photo. Declan at charity galas in evening wear. Declan shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. Declan featured in Forbes, Fortune, Bloomberg Businessweek. His net worth estimated in the billions, with a B. Blentech innovator, Declan Frost announces temporary leave from CEO position dated exactly 3 months before they'd met. Imani's stomach lurched violently. The timeline matched perfectly. He'd told her he'd walked away from his family business 3 months before they met. He'd said he needed time to figure out who he was without expectations. He just hadn't mentioned that the family business was a multi-billion-dollar technology empire, that he wasn't just some guy doing freelance consulting. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country. Her vision blurred. The office around her seemed to tilt and sway. They'd split groceries last week, $40. She'd transferred him $20 through a payment app, and he'd thanked her. He could probably buy the entire grocery store, the whole chain, the building her office was in. She clicked through more photos, each one driving the reality deeper into her chest like a blade. There was Declan, her husband, the man who'd held her last night while they watched a movie on her laptop, standing next to his father at some corporate announcement. The caption identified Richard Frost, founder of Frost Industries, and his son Declan, CEO. There was Declan at a technology conference, giving a keynote speech to thousands. There was Declan featured in a 30 under 30% profile from 5 years ago, discussing his vision for sustainable technology and ethical business practices. Every article painted the same picture: brilliant, driven, born into wealth, and building even more. A man who'd grown a family company into a global empire. A man whose annual income probably exceeded what Imani would make in her entire lifetime. The contrast between the Declan in these articles and the man who'd moved into her studio apartment with 3 shirts and a coffee maker was so stark that Imani felt like she was looking at 2 different people. Except they weren't different people. They were the same person. Her husband had been lying to her for 6 weeks. Not technically lying, maybe. He'd never explicitly said he was poor or struggling, but he'd let her believe it. He'd watched her carefully budget their meals. He'd split bills with her. He'd lived in her tiny apartment, like someone with limited means, all while being worth billions. Imani barely made it to the bathroom before she was sick. She knelt on the cold tile floor, her body rejecting the reality she'd just uncovered. When the nausea finally passed, she stood on shaking legs and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked exactly the same as she had an hour ago, but everything had changed. The foundation she thought she'd been building, the partnership between 2 people starting fresh, building something real from honest ground, was a lie. Not a lie, that same rational voice in her head tried to argue. An omission, but wasn't that the same thing? Wasn't letting someone believe something false just as bad as telling them something false? Marcus had lied about his feelings, his commitment, his fidelity. Declan had lied about his entire identity. Imani walked back to her desk like a ghost, moving through motions without feeling them. She sent a quick email to her supervisor, saying she needed to leave for a family emergency, grabbed her purse and walked out of the office. She didn't remember getting to her car, didn't remember the route home. Her mind kept showing her images: Declan in a tuxedo at a gala, Declan laughing with her over cheap takeout, Declan signing their marriage certificate with the same hand that had signed billion-dollar deals. Who was he? Who had she actually married? The question played on repeat as she drove through Atlanta traffic, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. By the time she pulled into the parking lot of her apartment building, shock had burned away into something else. Rage. She took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator, each step fueling the fire building in her chest. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of playing house, of pretending to be someone he wasn't, of watching her clip coupons and budget carefully while sitting on a fortune. When she reached her apartment door, her hands steadied. The shaking stopped. Inside, she knew, was her husband. Time to find out who he really was. What happens when Imani confronts Declan? Will their marriage survive this deception? Can trust ever be rebuilt after such a massive betrayal? Find out in Part 2, available now. Click the link in the description or the card above to continue this incredible journey. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Drop a comment telling me, would you stay or would you leave? See you in Part 2.